Inshallah, we'd like to start off the program with the recitation of Surah Yasin. And we want to dedicate this recitation, inshallah, to the following marhumin: Marhum Sayyid Afzal Hassan Abidi, Ibn Mir Muhammad Reza, and all the marhumin of the Abidi family. And of course, we also remember the brother of Shabir Bhai Shigri, who passed away a couple of days ago in Pakistan. And inshallah, for all our marhumin as well, we can start off with a Surah Al-Fatiha. Rahimallahu man qara al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Yasin wal Qur'anil Hakim. إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم أن لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات. رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة مع الصلوات. اللهم صل على
Ahsantum, Haj Muhammad Abbas, for a beautiful recitation of Surah Yasin. First and foremost, I would like to send condolences to all of you on this event where we are commemorating the Shahada of our 8th Imam, Imam Ali Redha alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. I would like to kindly request Brother Iqtidar to kindly present the salam with salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. امام زمانہ باواز بلندتر صلوات اللهم صل علی
حاضرین السلام علیکم.
وعلیکم السلام ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ.
I'll just repeat Surah Fatiha for Marhum Sayyid Afzal Hasan Abdi, Ibn Mir Muhammad Raza, and Marhumin of Abdi family, and all your Marhumin, and for those for whom there is no one to recite Fatiha. Salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
علی کا نام ہی ایمان کی جوانی ہے، علی کا نام ہی ایمان کی جوانی ہے، نبی کے بعد انہی کی تو حکمرانی ہے، نبی کے بعد انہی کی تو حکمرانی ہے، فریب و ظلم کے آگے جو ہم نہیں جھکتے، فریب و ظلم کے آگے جو ہم نہیں جھکتے، ہم اہل حق پہ علی کی مہربانی ہے، ہم اہل حق پہ علی کی ہی مہربانی ہے، نعرہ حیدری. ایک صلوات پڑھیے گا. ایک سلام مدح امام رضی علی رضا علیہ السلام. السلام شاہ شاہ السلام، السلام فخر انسان، السلام باعث تخلیق انسان، السلام اے شہنشاہ خراسان، السلام اے تہی دستوں کے حامی مر جا، اے شفیع اہل ایمان السلام، ضامن و سامن تقی و متقی، اے حبیب خاص یزداں السلام، تیری تابانی سے روشن ہے جہاں، السلام نور یزداں السلام، حضرت کاظم کے ماہ چاردہ جس سے روشن ہے خراسان السلام، السلام اے دل بر موسیٰ رضا، ابن جعفر کے دل و جاں السلام، اے علی و فاطمہ کے نور عین، مصطفیٰ کے ماہ تاباں السلام، السلام اے سید و سردار دین، نونہال شاہ مردان السلام، آپ سے ہے توس کا درجہ بلند، السلام شاہ تہران السلام، السلام شاہ السلام، صلوات صلوات
Jazakallah Brother for your citation. Inshallah, without further ado, I would like to request our respected Sheikh Muhammad Mehdi to come present his lecture with Allah salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala
رسالت نعرہ رسالت نعرہ حیدری 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 محمد و اہل بیت محمد صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم، بفضل الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الحمد لله والحمد حقه كما يستحقه حمدا كثيرا. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. اللهم لعن أول ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له على ذلك. اللهم لعن العصابة التي جاهدت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله. اللهم لعنهم جميعا. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله وعلى أهل بيتك الطيبين الطاهرين. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ومولاي يا علي بن موسى الرضا، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة. غريب يا مظلوم كربلاء، يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز فوزا عظيما. أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. These are, or should say, this is the final day of Safar. For many people, they begin to prepare. For those that were unable to get married, they think of Rabi' al-Awwal to be the beginning when they can go back to their regular operation of life and the way that they were able to do things before. But for some, they've already engaged in this after the 10th of Muharram because they see that as the final day. But after these 2 months of lamentation, these 2 months of mourning, those that felt the effect of Muharram and those that were affected by Muharram and affected by the majalis attempt to make their lives more in the line of the lives of al-a'imma al-ma'sumin and those that were martyred and those that stood up for what was right, as opposed to those that were just there. They listened to the majlis, and after the majlis they returned to their regular lives. They returned to the way that they went. You know, we used to see this in the Hajj. We finished the manasik of the Hajj, and then you see the people where the aura of the Hajj is upon them. They've changed. And then there's those as if, you know, it's my bucket list. I've just ticked off another event. Likewise with the ziyarah of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, ziyarat al-Arba'in. There are those that are there for the festivities and the function or for the vlog or whatever. And then there are those because they are actually on a journey to re-establish their connection with Allah Azza wa Jal. What we call born again Muslims, people that want to become righteous. And this is our reason why we do things. If people think the reason why we do things is to gain forgiveness, you're thinking on the lowest level. Because when you ask Allah Azza wa Jal to forgive you, the Messenger of God sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam says, if you have remorse, Allah forgives you before you utter the istighfar. Just have remorse. Even when we read Dua Qumel, it's not about getting forgiveness. Because I begin with a line right at the beginning and I know I'm safe. Allahumma inni as'aluka bi rahmatika allati wasi'at kulla shay. Your mercy that encompasses everything. What does it mean encompasses? That means there's nothing. That is the outer circle. There's nothing beyond this. This is the final frontier. Above and beyond that, there's nothing. Everything's within. The wrath of God, within. The trials from God, within. The mercy is the outer circle. I begin by asking by this, Allah Azza wa Jalla has forgiven me. But that's not what I want. I go on in the dua, waj'al lisani bidhikrika lahija. Just make my tongue always mention you. Why am I mentioning you? وَقَلْبِي بِحُبِّكَ مُتَيَّمًا. I love you. You are everything. I was coming towards the center and I said to my son, one of the worst things people say is that I want unconditional love. I said, that doesn't exist. I said, love is conditional. The condition is, do they love Allah? I love them. I love whoever Allah loves and I hate whoever Allah hates. This is the fundamental part of Islam. This is what Islam is built upon. Your relationship should be in line and in tune with Allah Azza wa Jal. Tonight or today, we're still in the daytime, we commemorate the martyrdom of the 8th Holy Imam. And make no mistake, when we talk about the 14 Ma'sumin, with the exception of the living Imam Al-Hujjat ibn Al-Hasan Al-Mehdi, Arwahuna Fida, they were all martyred, meaning yes, they were all killed. Either they were killed by sword or they were killed with poisoning. Whether people bring contention to this issue on how they were killed and the method they were killed. And this is how they departed from this world. Now, one of the titles given to the Imam is the title of Imam al-Zamin. You know, sometimes you go to the shrine of Ali ibn Musa Redha salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi and you see Zamine Ahu. You know, the guarantor. When we say Zamin, he is someone that, like when we say someone that accepts responsibility for another. You know, someone sponsors you or promotes you. In that sense, they're the ones that, he's your guarantor. Like I'm vouching. So when we say that you are the guarantor, the Imam that is the guarantor, and especially with this line, Zamani Ahu, that they write is the guarantor of the deer or the guarantor of the gazelle. Now, this is one of the most oft repeated stories. They say that a hunter caught a gazelle. The gazelle called for help. The Imam came, and the story is that the gazelle had a baby to feed. So in other words, it was a doe, and it had a fawn. So this gazelle, this female deer or female gazelle, I don't know, interchangeable words, because deer is more general. Gazelle's a type of deer. Now, this deer, the reason I'm using gazelle, sometimes deer is always used with something being expensive or someone that you hold close to you. So generally I'll use the word interchangeably. So this deer, in the narration, it's mentioned that it called for help. And the hunter that had captured this deer, probably with a trap, and it spoke to the Imam as the Imam would understand the talk of the deer, that it had a fawn it needed to feed. And the Imam gave it a guarantee that it would return to the hunter once the fawn had been weaned. So when the deer or the gazelle returned, the hunter released it because it had been guaranteed by the Imam. Now, Sunni and Shia narrate this hadith, but about the Messenger of God, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. So this story is in existence between Sunni and Shia, but it's for the Prophet. And in fact, believe it or not, the Shia narrations do never attribute it to the 8th Imam. It's attributed in other narrations to the 10th Imam and other Imams other than the 8th Imam. So the way we've adopted it with the 8th Imam is it's verbally. It's been given to us, and that's possibly the way it was transmitted. We don't have any written, authentic evidence that it was related to the 8th Imam. Now, there was a story that did happen, and this was after the martyrdom of the Imam with regard to this. There was a story of what we call in Australia a bushranger, or what they call in America a highwayman, or what they call in the Arab world qatta'in al-turuq, which are the people that pretty much stop you on your journey. You know, in the old days, the towns would have city walls and gates, and no one would go out after dark. But those that would journey from one walled city to another would have to trek in the land and would have the fear of being stopped by bushrangers. And because that's the Australian term, they call them bushrangers, which is, you know, bushranger people think it's someone that works at the national park or something. So these bushrangers would prevent them, they would rob them, and in some cases they would kill them. Now this qata' al-turuq, this bushranger, was hunting using the narrations, and the story says he was using a fahd. A fahd in Arabic is a term that's used for cheetah, leopard, jaguar, all fall under the term fahd. They all share that term interchangeably, and I think it could be the reason, I'm assuming from this, it could be because they're all spotted animals. They're all spotted big cats. You know, there are spotted small cats if you want to get pedantic, but the big cats, the only spotted big cats are these three. Now, back in the old days, because you need to have context, because sometimes people say, how's this possible? You know, if someone was to mention some animals to people, they say, well, where did you come up with this animal? Because if you look even in England, on their emblem, what do they usually have? The 3 lions. And you think, England, lions. Were there lions in Europe? Yes, they were. And if you go through history, a lot of people don't know, probably Hajj Abbas knows this, that there are, in India, there are still lions, but they're not as common. Asiatic lions still exist. You know, they're not only limited to Africa, but even through Africa, they've been brought back, where to? They've been brought back into more of the eastern, down towards the southern. The more northern lions have also been wiped out. Even with leopards and cheetahs, there used to be Asiatic, and they still do exist, cheetahs. And these cheetahs used to be called hunting leopards. Even though cheetahs, they call them hunting leopards. And what they would use them for is for hunting. So they get the cheetah, and they get the cheetah to run off after a deer. And now when he did this, he had seen a deer, this bushranger. It ran towards a direction where it came to the vicinity of the shrine of the Imam. When it crossed the boundary, the cheetah would stop. And it would not engage until it left that boundary. And this is one of the reasons they called him Imam Ad-Damin. And this is one of the reasons they called him the Imam that guarantees in this manner. Now, one of the things, he kept attempting to catch the deer until in the last moment it went to a doorway and it didn't return. So the story was mentioned from generation to generation, and this is what gave him the title. Now, one of the first things that people tend to bring up is sometimes people say, all right, why do people mention these stories? They sound so far-fetched. It's a big thing. And someone would come up to me and say, well, why do you mention these stories? Why is it that these stories, you know, the Imam protecting a deer, speaking to a deer? And I said to one guy that was asking me, I said, look, there's another book that has a lot of these surreal stories, or these mythological, as you look, or fantasy stories. You know, and I'm not referring to J.K. Rowling, you know. I said, the book that I'm referring to has a story that's so ridiculous about a man who's moving with his army, and as about to take off, he listens and he hears the ants having a conversation. And then he says that the ants have mentioned that they're afraid that he and his army will destroy them. And this book also has a story with this same man about a bird called a hudhud that leaves, and he threatens to beat this bird for not being in its place. And he said, what book are you talking about? I said, it's called the Quran. So either this is all surreal and it's all make-believe, the hadith and the Quran, or you can see that these things do happen and that they are existence. Now, always say talking to animals. We're not talking about stories like Dr. Dolittle. Nor are we talking about people with parcel tongue. We're talking about genuinely people that can speak to animals. In the hadith, it mentions عُلِّمْنَا مَنْطِقَ الطَّيْرِ. The Imam says we were taught the speech of the bird. And in this same notion, you will hear that in the case of Sulaiman ibn Dawood, where he spoke to the bird, and Dawood would speak, remember when he used to do his tasbih, the birds and the mountains would also be making the tasbih with him. This is all in the Quran. So it's not something for someone to come out and say, where do you come up with these stories? And if you want to really listen to something delusional, listen to a scientist speaking about what? What's Marvel promoting now? What? The multiverse. This is the most delusional discussion that you can listen to. You know, especially when they talk about time travel, it's so ridiculous. But they keep repeating it, and they make really big movies about this and about time travel and the possibility of people returning to time. And people watch so many movies and read so many books about someone coming from the future. And, you know, one of the things that totally kills this is the theory that they bring up that if someone, for example, and this is where you get caught, imagine you can go back through time. If I go back through time 100 years and I kill my grandfather while he's still a child, before he's had my father, what happens there? Can that happen? It'd be impossible. Because if I kill my grandfather, in order for me to kill my grandfather, I've stopped something from taking place for me to be born, to do this. So it becomes impossible, but they make all these theories and they promote them and they push them out there, and all these are made and people gobble them up. You'll sit there. I once sat with a person that was saying to me, did you know orangutans are now in their stone age? And I said, all right, so when did the orangutans get to where we are? He said, in about another 20 million years. I said, okay, I'll see you when we get there. You know, what do you mean another 20 years? I said, science used to be a study of observation. Everything's observable. And this is what we follow. You know, once Neil deGrasse Tyson, he says a lot of ludicrous things, but he said that the theory of evolution, or the Darwinian theory of evolution, the origin of man, origin of species, he said is as provable or is as factual as the theory of gravity. And I didn't want to, you don't want to go deep into this and tell him, listen, which is the Newtonian theory of gravity or Einstein's theory of, what are you talking about? But the thing is, I just said simple, pick up a pen, drop it, gravity's proven. It's observable. It has to be something that's observable. And this is how things would work. And if you notice when they talk, they say, for the first time we witnessed this. And this is where a scientist would document. Now they've become fantasy writers. They've all become L. Ron Hubbards in their own way, or Stephen King's. So anyway, the thing is, and this is a subject rarely discussed, is when we say that the Imam is Damina Ahu, the guarantor of the animal. One of the things that is rarely spoken about is animal protection and what animals are perceived in Islam. And I'm not moving, you got to understand, I'm not talking about becoming like the people whose dogs lick their mouths after they've licked some other dog's orifice. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about whenever you see a video of an animal being tortured, you know pretty much where you can pinpoint the region of where these videos come from. You know, or something where there's animals being maltreated. So, and this is a big problem in the world. Now, even still, once again, we're not targeting certain people in certain regions. But it's very important for people to understand, because if I know how to deal with animals in general and what the rights of animals, then I realize that humans are first tier, they're top tier. If an animal has rights, what are the rights of a human being? Then I can understand that if this animal has this right, what is the right of my brother and sister? Yeah, something as simple as that's been destroyed by, you see that some people, they're not from our sect, other sects, I've seen it, they don't even say Assalamu alaikum or Salamun alaikum, they say Sa'aikum. I don't know if you've heard it, they say Sa'aikum. When they mention the Prophet, they say Sa'salam. They don't even say Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam or Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. They devour this to the point where they've got to the point when they say Allah, they don't say Azza wa Jal, they say Azzal. You can actually watch these videos. Azzal means he left. The words have actually been devoured. The salam is no longer existence. When Assalamu alaikum is for me to tell another Muslim, what does Assalamu alaikum mean? Peace be upon you, meaning that you, my friend, are safe from my tongue. That I'm not going to backbite you when you leave. That I'm not going to cause problems between you and other parties when you leave. And you are safe from my hand. That I will not be violent towards you. In fact, I am someone that adheres to the verse in the Quran where Allah Azza wa Jal says, Muhammadun Rasulullah sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Muhammad is the messenger of God. وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ, the ones with you. أَشِدَّاءُ عَلَى الْكُفَّارِ, their sternness is against those that belie their religion, those that reject them. رُحَمَاءُ بَيْنَهُمْ, they are merciful to one another. The followers of Rasulullah are merciful to one another. That I'm an adherent of that when I say Assalamu alaikum to someone else. So this is why it's important to understand this. And because if I don't understand, then I do not understand the way Allah Azza wa Jal made this world for me to function in it. And once again, when I mention that the problem exists in our communities, I need to make it very clear that the difference between our part of the world is due to lack of education. But if you want to look into the part of the world of the capitalist and what they do with animals, you don't even need to, and I won't even give you an avenue for you to look, but the things that they've committed are atrocities. And forget animals, just suffices is their human trafficking records and the files that their leaders refuse to release because of what exposure you will get to what they are. But you get an idea, like, when someone asks me now, how were the Indigenous Australians treated? I say, go have a look at Gaza. How were the indigenous Americans treated? In other words, indigenous Australians, how were they treated by Captain James Cook and Captain Arthur Phillip? How were even the hubris in calling it the land? Terranullis calling it the land of nobody, nobody's land. That tells you exactly what they thought of them. Or Christopher Columbus referring to the American people when he turned the indigenous Americans as Indians. Why did he mention that they were Indians when he arrived there? And up till now, they call them Indians. Why do they call them Indians? Do you think this is the arrogance? You know, have you ever heard the statement when they say it's all Greek to me? And it's all the same. You know, it's us and everybody else. So I'm not trying to say that their way of life, God forbid, no, their way of life is as decadent as you can imagine. But my problem is with the Muslims and the Muslim world when it comes to this. Now, if we go with this, we need to understand that humans sometimes may perceive that animals don't understand and don't recognize. Animals have recognition. You've seen videos where dogs protect their families, even cats. And even when we mention the martyrdom of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, as you listen to the narration, as he leaves his house, they say in the courtyard there were what? Geese. You've heard the narration. And the geese begin to call out. They begin to make noises because they know what's about to take place. They have an understanding. The animal sees the unseen world, unlike the human. The animal sometimes, they perceive what is happening. The ambience of the situation, the animal has that perception for this. But let's take a look at what the narrations say when it comes to an animal and the treatment of an animal that you write and that you use. This narration is عن أبي عبد الله الصادق عليه السلام. He says, للدابة على صاحبها ستة حقوق. When we say الدابة, you hear the word دابة. الدابة means من يدب على الأرض, the ones that walk upon the earth. But generally it's associated with the domestic animals. He says these animals have 6 rights upon their owner. You know, people when they ride horse, what is the right of this horse? Remember, the horse isn't a vehicle of transport, you know, that you put strain on it and it's got shock absorbers. So just to give you an idea of their rights there, he says, لا يحملها فوق طاقتها. Firstly, do not overburden it or give it a weight that's more than its capacity, more than it's capable of carrying. He says, ولا يتخذ ظهرها مجالس يتحدث عليها. In other words, that when he is riding, not to sit on the back of the horse and communicate. You know, when they sit there and having, you've seen those westerns where the cowboy's on the back of the horse and he's sitting and having a chinwag with someone else. Not to even use it to that point. And then he says, وَيَبْدَأُ بِعَلْفِهَا إِذَا نَزَلَ. So the first place when you get down is to take the horse to eat, or to take the ride that you have to eat. وَلَا يَسِمُهَا وَلَا يَضْرِبُهَا فِي وَجْهِهَا فَإِنَّهَا تُسَبِّحُ. To not brand this animal and to not strike the animal in its face. Imagine this. People strike other humans in their face. Why? He says, فَإِنَّهَا تُسَبِّحُ. That this animal glorifies God. Not to strike it in its face, to that point. He says, وَيَعْرُضُ عَلَيْهَا الْمَاءِ إِذَا مَرَّ بِهِ. And any time that they pass by water, to take the animal to water to see if the animal wants to drink. If you look at these 6 points, it gives you an idea of the way an animal is treated with God's command, the way that God has selected for an animal to be treated. And this gives you an understanding then, if this animal has all these rights, and I'll read through all these narrations, and what is the rights of a human? Then furthermore, what are the rights of a believer? And the station of a believer in this manner. That I need to understand this. Even if you take a look at the master of martyrs, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, when he is prevented by Hur and his battalion from moving, when they first arrive and he sees they are tired, not only does he give them water, he gives water to their horses. And they cool down their horses with water. These are very important points. You think to yourself that the Imam would treat it in this manner. That this is a horse. This is the position and the station of this horse. Now, one of the stories that is mentioned, before I get to this, a lot of the times, an animal, if you see this with guide dogs, why they're called guide dogs, that they help the blind. They see one of the scene and guide dogs, and that they're able to give that kind of guidance. This is also seen with the horses. That the Imam mentions, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, لا يضربها على النفار. So, sometimes the horse fails to listen to instruction. He says, لأنها ترى ما لا ترون. That it can see what you do not see. It can perceive what you do not perceive. So you might see it's obstinate, so he doesn't react in this manner. And this you will see. I remember once, I don't know if you ever seen that video, the police horses are walking, the horses, and there was Sydney, they have the rainbow crossing, and the horses refused to, they shunned that and they refused to walk on it. There must have been a reason, there must have been a purpose to that, but sometimes they perceive something. And one of the most well-known stories with this is, have you ever heard the story of Balaam and his donkey? Balaam, son of Beor, in Arabic is known as Bal'am Ba'ura. Bal'am Ba'ura was somebody that was mustajab ad-da'wah, which means that when he prayed to God, God would answer his prayer. And people would come from far for his dua and his blessing. So in his land, like he was it, everyone would come to him. He was the main guy. News came to him. Some of the narrations say Musa ibn Amran was coming, alayhi salam, and the Israelites. Others would say it was Joshua, Yusha ibn Nun. But in either case, Musa being Rasulullah and Nabiullah, alayhi ala nabiyina wa alihi wa alayhi afdal salatu wa salam, or Joshua being the first wasi, Yusha ibn Nun being the first wasi, successor of Musa. Either way, these two arriving would take your place. And when you read the narrations, that when Imam al-Mehdi comes out, what do the people say to him? And we're not talking about the kuffar here. The people that reject Imam Mahdi, who are they? Read what the hadith says. They say, Irja' yabna Fatima. So when they say go back, who? They don't say go back, oh imposter. They don't say go back, oh Dajjal, or go back, in the sense that, you're not. No, they say go back, oh son of Fatima. In other words, they know who he is. La hajata lana fik. We do not need you. We've got the system under control. So people in prominent positions, Imagine that you are, for example, a person that is a scholar in your community, and someone with a higher scholarly level, a mujtahid, turns up and wants to take your place or wants to come to your region. Are the people going to sit down? They're going to sit down with the mujtahid. They're going to benefit from the mujtahid. Imagine that you are this scholar that's of the highest pedigree, like Bal'am Ba'ura, and a prophet or a wasi is turning up. This is what Iblis, when he does his waswasa, he comes and says, listen, you know when you're sitting in your house and you have a candle, you have the lights on. The day comes, the sun comes. You have a light out on the porch, on the patio, and the sun rises. Can you even see that light anymore? You turn it off. He said, your candle will be extinguished because the sun has risen. That's why when Imam al-Hujjah comes, this is what it is. الشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها. الشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها. That nahar, that dawn that comes out, the tafsir says, is the hur of the Imam al-Hujjah. It's a dawn. Why is it like a dawn? Because the dawn comes after the darkness of the night. That's the first light, and it brings that nur through the darkness. That's why we say, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ, the Lord of the dawn, because the dawn comes out after the darkness. So when this light comes in, you are nothing. So Bal'am Ba'ura said to himself, I will be nothing. I will not be recognized. What do I do? And Iblis once again whispered, said, Allah accepts your prayer. Go to the mount, stand on the mount and curse Musa or curse Yusha and his followers to death. Allah will accept your prayer. So Bal'am Ba'ura rode his donkey. His donkey rode up the mountain, and then the donkey stopped. The donkey stopped. So what did Bal'am do? He began to beat the donkey. Beat the donkey. Beat the donkey, and it would not move. And then Allah Azza wa Jal allowed the donkey to speak. And the donkey said to Bal'am Ba'ura, said what? Said, you do not see what I see before you. Before you. Before you there is an angel standing with his sword unsheathed. That if I cross another moment, your head will fly off your shoulders. Innahum yaraw, the Imam says, they see what you do not see. Bal'am Ba'ura, what happened to him? He didn't turn back to God. In fact, God said, had he turned back after all this mess, we would have elevated him. So when you do istighfar, Allah elevates you. He said, however, he became someone that was what? Of the people of the earth, of the people of the dunya. He said, so his example is like tukramun, with all respect to the people, the mu'mineen present. He said his example is like the example of the dog. He said, if you come up on a dog, what does a dog do? It pants, huffs and puffs. And if you leave the dog, what does it do? It pants. This is what he is, nothing else. And that was what the station of Bal'am Ba'ura was. Now, even when it comes to the right, sometimes we think of things to be insignificant. And I'll use this hadith. To what point? Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, when he mentions in this narration, He says, Wallah, لو أعطيت الأقاليم السبعة. Now when we talk الأقاليم السبعة, he says basically the domains of the seven heavens. It mentions, when we mention the seven stars, the seven heavens, and how it is, I do not comprehend. As we are told, there's seven heavens. And then he says, بما تحت أفلاكها, that whatever exists under the skies. In other words, if I was given dominion over all the existence, all the creation, that I was going to be given the ultimate power. He says, listen to this. أن أعصي الله في نملة أسلبها جلب شعير ما فعلته. Okay. He said, imagine this. Some people sell for things of value. Amir al-Mu'mineen of small value. He says, if I was given dominion over everything, sovereignty over everything, in order to get all this, I would disobey God by doing what? By taking a husk of barley from an ant. By doing something that you'd look at as something that meager. He said, I would not do it. Sometimes you think, so why is he talking about ants? Why is he talking about this? You know, this is what people don't understand, why we talk about animals. If you look, I think it was Paul Riesler, I think that's his name, I can't remember. It was an FBI, one of these professors, I think, or teachers, agent, but he talks about, in the study of criminology, and you probably all know this from all the shows people have watched, that most psychopaths and serial killers begin with torturing animals. They begin with this. This is where they start off with. They start small and they grow. Even if someone was to join the police force, when they teach them anti-corruption, they tell them that anti-corruption begins with what? They go with you turning up without uniform to McDonald's because they get their food for free or half price, and showing your badge to get cut price food. They said this is where corruption begins. Something you think, oh, basita, this is small. You know? Amir al-Mu'mineen says, even for me to take that from an ant, for me to even oppress that much. And you think about it, what's the purpose? I'm not saying if you've got termites in your house, don't kill them. No, you kill them. That's different. They're destroying your habitat, destroying your home. You know, you see a funnel web spider, give him a salute. You know, nice day, he says nice day, and he keeps going. No, it's not the way it works. It's about, a sheikh b'sheikh yuzkar. It's like when someone says to me, is divorce that bad? I said, it depends. Depends on the purpose of divorce. They say, well, so what's good and bad? It's like, you know, how long's a piece of string? Where do you want me to start? How do I explain this? Things in their place. An ant that's walking away with some barley has nothing to do with me. And I go out of my way just to destroy its home. Something that simple. If I can do something like that, this is where I begin. Howbeit when I'm talking about oppression of others. When you see people, they go to the Hajj and go to Ziyarah and they have the haqq of others on their neck, hanging from their neck. He's stolen from someone. He's taken a debt from someone and not repaid it. You know, it's so funny when you need to lend someone money, how humble and nice they are in requesting. When you need to ask for your own money back, you feel like it's so arduous and so overbearing that they make you feel like it's a task to get your money back. This is so un-Islamic. This is not the trait of a Muslim. And this is why we begin with something like this. And this is why these are very important for people to look at. Even when we go back to, once again, the martyrdom of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And everything's linked to him in understanding these things. You know what he says? when he is struck by Abdul Rahman ibn Muljam al-Muradi, he says to them, if I live, I will deal with him. But if I die, you strike him one strike for what he struck me. And he says, and do not mutilate him. You know, in the Jahiliyyah, Hind, as we mention her in the Ziyarat Ashura, we mention Muawiyah, we say, وَابْنُ آكِلَةِ الْأَكْبَادِ. Imagine this is what is known as the son of the liver eater. She was known for mutilating the soldiers of the Muslims. She would mutilate them. The least of it is she would eat their liver. I don't need to explain what else she used to do to the bodies, but she would mutilate them. And even if you see, for example, where they would, when you're talking about, for example, in cricket, when they take a wicket, what do they call it? A scalp. Who said that? You take a scalp. Where'd they get that from? Where'd you get a scalp from? Because they used to scalp people. They used to remove their scalp, the top of their skull, they would cut it off. That was a form of mutilation. So you count them. If you ever watched any of the Vietnam documentaries or movies where you'd see people would make necklaces of ears of the people that they have killed, the American soldiers would do. And even more recently in Syria. Do you remember in Syria, back in the mid-2010, 11, where there was the other guy that was eating the other soldiers, one of the Dawash, he would eat, his name was Abu Hafsa, I think it was. He would be eating the hearts of the other soldiers. What brings people to this point? So Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen said Abdul Rahman, and just to let you know who Abdul Rahman ibn Muljam is. When Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam mentions him, he says to Amir al-Mu'mineen, وَقَدْ انْبَعَثَ إِلَيْكَ أَشْقَى الْأَوَّلِينَ وَالْآخِرِينَ. The most wretched, the most accursed will come and kill you. And he mentions Shaqiq Aqir Naqati Thamud. He is the brother of the one that killed the she-camel of Thamud. He's one of those. He's one of the most wretched people. This most wretched person, Abdul Rahman ibn Muljam al-Muradi, that Amir al-Mu'mineen mentions, he says that you hit him with a single strike. وَلَا تُمَثِّلُ بِالرَّجُلِ. Do not mutilate him. فَإِنِّي سَمِعْتُ حَبِيبِ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. Because I have heard my beloved messenger of God say, إياكم والمثلة ولو بالكلب العقور. Do not mutilate even a rabid dog. You know what a rabid dog is? A dog with rabies. Do not even mutilate a rabid dog. You killed a rabid dog. Do not mutilate. This is what we... To mention, to know the value of a believer, the value of a human being. That even this second tier of existence, and I'm not telling you all to become vegan right now, eat more meat. No, I'm just saying, we're not talking about someone thinking of going down that road, but we're saying this is the reality of the situation that people overlook. Even I remember when Steve Irwin was killed by the stingray and people started killing all the stingrays around the Australian coast. Or even the Rodney Fox, one of the most famous people that was attacked by a shark, 462 stitches he had from a shark bite. He was wearing a wetsuit, that's all they kept his body together. Afterwards, what did he do? He went on to help conserving sharks. Obviously, if they enter our land, human life is always above theirs, and they're the ones that have priority. Now, when we look at this, we mention about the slaughtering of animals. Because Ali ibn Musa, and this is the last night of the last moment we have in Safar, he mentions in the narration when he speaks to Rayyan ibn Shabib, and he says to him, Ya ibn Shabib, he says into him, In kunta bakiyan, that if you wish to weep, فابكي على الحسين. If you want to cry, cry over Imam Hussein. He says, فإنه ذبح كما يذبح الكبش. That he was slaughtered like someone would slaughter a sheep. And these words are very appropriate for the mention of this hadith. But the only things I'll give you in similarity and in the difference. The similarity in this is that with a sheep, that when a sheep is being slaughtered, everyone's overjoyous because it's usually done on Eid. And on this day, they were all beating their drums. They were all celebrating this. And when a sheep is being slaughtered, everyone takes a part of the sheep. But the only difference in this case is that before a sheep is being slaughtered, a sheep is given water to drink. But in the case of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, Imam Hussein alayhi salam was not given any water to drink on the last moments. When he stood and he looked at the enemy and he said, Ya Qawm, O people, he said, Askuni sharabatum min al-ma, give me some water to drink. And they said, O Hussein, you will not be given any water until you drink from the Hawiyah, until you drink from the fire of hell, from the springs in the fire of hell. When Imam Hussein alayhi salam realized it was hopeless and there was no chance that the enemy would give him any water to drink, he made one attempt and he broke through them. When he arrived towards the water, he was with his horse. He said to the horse, I am thirsty and you are thirsty, so you drink. The horse nodded his head in affirmation as Imam Hussein alayhi salam, was the narration says, was about to drink. Some of the enemies called out, Ya Hussein, you will taste the sweetness of the water while your tents have been attacked. So even at this point, Imam Hussein was unable to drink from the water. He rode the horse and returned and found that no one was near the tents. No one had arrived to attack the tents. So then he farewelled everyone at this point. He farewelled his family, that this was going to be his final attempt. As Imam Hussein alayhi salam was about to leave, he had a call. It said, Oh Hussein, turn to me. He turned back and he saw it was his sister Zainab. Zainab said, Oh Hussein, come down from upon your horse. And she kissed him on his neck. And she kissed him and embraced his chest. Then she looked towards Medina. And she said, Oh Mother Fatima, I have fulfilled your trust. So Imam Hussein alayhi salam said to Zainab, what is this trust? She said on the last moments before our mother died, she called me in. She said, "Oh Zainab, if you find your brother Hussein all alone in Karbala," she said, "kiss him on his neck, for this is where the sword will strike, and embrace his chest, for this is where the hooves will trample him. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين حسين يا 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 حسين
المدد مولا رضا المدد مولا رضا المدد مولا رضا تو ہے مسیحا جہاں شاہ خراساں ہے لقب یوں ہر فرشتہ روز پر آتا ہے تیرے بعد حارد نہیں ہوتے تیرے روزے پہ کوئی بھی دعا نانا نبی دادا علی دادی تیری خیر النساء المدد مولا رضا المدد المدد مولا رضا بینائی بھی دیتا ہے تو گویائی بھی دیتا ہے تو مانگے اگر تجھ سے کوئی دانائی بھی دیتا ہے تو بھی تو باب علم ہے تو بھی تو ہے مشکل خشا نانا نبی دادا علی دادی تیری خیر النساء المدد مولا رضا المدد مولا رضا المدد المدد ہے زامین آہو بھی تو غل بھی ہے تو خوشبو بھی تو ہے پہنچتا ہر آنکھ سے گرتے ہوئے آنسو بھی تو تیری عطائے دیکھ کر دشمن کو بھی کہنا پڑا نانا نبی دادا علی دادی تیری خیر النساء المدد لا رضا المدد لا رضا المدد المدد تیری کرامات نظر شب ہو کہ ہو وقت سحر لیتا ہے ہر ظاہر تیرا روزے کی جالی چوم کر مشہد مقدس ہو گیا تو نے جو آ کر دی اذان نانا نبی داد علی دادی تیری خیر النساء المدد المدد مولا رضا المدد مولا رضا روزے سے تیرے دور ہے ہم تو بہت مجبور ہے، آنکھوں سے آنسو ہے روا، دل بھی غموں سے چور ہے، تجھ سے کہیں گے حال دل، اذن زیارت کر عطا، نانا نبی دادا علی، دادی تیری خیر النساء، المداد مولا رضا، المداد مولا رضا، المداد مولا رضا، المداد مولا رضا، وہ عبد بیمار تھا، بدے بیمار تھا، چلنے سے جو لاچار تھا، چلنے سے جو چار تھا، اور شام کا بازار تھا، اور شام کا بازار تھا، اور مصطفیٰ کے بیٹیاں مولا یا حسین، مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین، مولا امام یا حسن یا حسین، یا حسین یا حسین، شبیر کی وہ لاڈلی، شبیر کی لاڈلی ہے، سینے پہ جو شاہ کے پلی، سینے پہ جو شاہ کے پلی، جس کے ابابن میں جلے، جس کے ابابن میں جلے، منہ پر تماچوں کے نشان، مولا حق امام حسن یا حسین، مولا امام یا حسن یا حسین، مولا حق امام حسن یا حسین، یا حسین یا حسین، شام غریب آ گئی، شام غریب آ گئی، ہائے عابد کو غیرت کھا گئی، عابد کو غیرت کھا گئی، پہرے پہ زینب آ گئی، پہرے پہ زینب آ گئی، عباس اور اکبر کہاں، مولا حق امام حسین، مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین، مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین، یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین، حسین محمد و آل محمد صلوات، اللہم صل علی محمد و آل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى أهل بيتك الطيبين الطاهرين. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبي طالب ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا فاطمة سيدتي نساء العالمين ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام على الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام على أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، عجل الله فرجك وسهل مخرجك، وجعلنا من أنصارك وأعوانك ومن المستشهدين بين يديك. اللهم قل لوليك صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا، حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين، والأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات والأرواح موتانا جميعا، ولقضاء الحوائج وقبول الأعمال وشفاء المرضى وغفران الذنوب وتعجيل الفرج وحسن العاقبة. رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.